Hello students, welcome to the last lesson of our AS Level Economics course, and today we're going to be looking at supply-side policies. What are supply-side policies? A supply-side policy is a government policy or initiative which is designed to increase the levels of productive capacity in an economy by shifting long-run aggregate supply outwards. This can be used in order to meet our macroeconomic objectives, and there are two different types of supply-side policies which we're going to look at. They are market-based policies and interventionist policies. Firstly, we're going to analyse the types of market-based policies. These are the policies which aim to increase levels of long-run aggregate supply by using cuts and little government intervention. Examples are going to include reducing taxes, cutting government expenditure on the public sector, cutting benefits, reducing trade union power, and privatisation. We'll begin by looking at reducing of taxes. If we're going to reduce taxes, and these taxes may include marginal taxes or income taxes, we're going to give workers more of an incentive in order to work because they're going to make more money. For example, because they're going to be taxed less on their income, they're going to want to work even more to make even more money, which is going to increase productive efficiency and productive capacity. However, if we cut marginal taxes, we won't have as much money to invest for the government, which will lower the accelerator effect and lower levels of welfare in the economy. Also, it may give people an incentive to not have to work at all, since they are going to be able to be paid a lot more without having to put the work in to do so. Now we're going to look at reducing government expenditure on the public sector as a form of supply-side policy. By cutting government spending on the public sector, we're going to have a lot more resources and a lot more funds left for the private sector to use. This is going to motivate people in the private sector to work a lot more and make more money because these retained profits are going to be kept for themselves. Now we're going to evaluate this technique. If we cut government spending, welfare will be lost, and because we're not going to be spending as much on merit goods in the public sector, standards of living are also going to then fall. Cutting benefits. By cutting benefits, households are going to have more of an incentive to have to sustain their living since their incomes have been removed. Now, this is going to increase productive capacity because as people realise that they're not going to have benefits to rely on in order to get them by, they're going to have to seek a job and use that job in order to sustain themselves. This is going to increase the levels of productive capacity. Now we're going to evaluate this technique. There will be less income to spend for these people, which is then going to reduce levels of aggregate demand, which is not going to be very good at being able to increase levels of GDP and isn't very good at all for the economy. Also, there may be more crime to make up for the loss because people may resort to crime in order to make up for the loss in benefits which they previously received. Privatisation. This occurs when a business transfers from ownership from the state to the private sector. This will give workers more of an incentive to want to work and innovate themselves and their products to make a lot more money and use these retained profits for themselves. Now we're going to evaluate this. Monopolies can begin to be owned by the state, which is a bit of a problem if we weren't to use these sense of privatisation, which will prevent competition and more employment. So it is a big positive to actually use privatisation. However, without state funding, cuts may have to be made in order to keep these privatised businesses alive, which could use reducing the size of the workforce. This will then reduce productive capacity, and it pretty much negates the whole reason of privatising in the first place. Reducing trade union power. If we reduce the power that trade unions have, they're not going to be able to request such high wages and such flexible hours of work. This will mean that people are going to have an incentive to have to work a lot more to make the same amount of income and work a lot more hours. This is going to increase productive capacity. When evaluating this, we have to realise that we're going to lower standards of living if people are going to be paid less and also if they're going to be given less flexible hours. This is therefore going to level and lower levels of welfare. Now we're going to look at interventionist policies. These are supply-side policies which are going to involve the government intervening in the current market system a lot more. Examples are going to include educating the population, training the population, research and development, improving infrastructure, and nationalisation. First, we'll look at education. By educating the population in a school, we're going to improve the skills and knowledge which they're going to have. This is then going to allow the households or consumers to be able to do the jobs which they previously haven't had the skills to do for, and this will therefore increase productive capacity. Now, the problem with this is that education costs a lot of money, and it doesn't guarantee that we're actually going to be able to fill the jobs which are needed to be filled in with. Also, education is a long-term process because it takes a while for someone to be fully educated from the moment they get into the school to the moment they leave for higher education or the workplace, which is not going to then work in the short term as a result. Training. Training is effectively the same as education. However, instead of educating the population or knowledge of subject areas in the workforce, we're going to train them in able to improve the skills which they have. This will allow them to do jobs which we currently don't have the skills in our economy to do so, and this will improve productive capacity. However, this costs a lot of money to do, as with education, and it doesn't guarantee that we're going to be able to fill the jobs which are needed to be filled in with, because these jobs may actually be filled in by people in the economy who maybe perhaps come over by migration, or we could have all of these extraneous variables and factors which affect it. As with education, this is only a long-term prospect and won't work in the short term. Research and development. Some government funds are going to be used to develop more products and innovate. So, by the fact that we're going to be improving our technology and improving the way in which we operate, we're going to improve productive efficiency, and this will lead to a benefit in productive capacity. Evaluation of R&D. Firstly, research and design costs a lot of money. However, this does result in an increase in social welfare, as improved standards of living are going to result from the fact that we're going to have more increased kind of technological advances which can make us a lot better at doing whatever we do. For example, all of this research and development into green technology and the use of green fuels are going to mean that standards of living and social welfare is improving, because we're not going to suffer that much from the effects from the environment. Infrastructure improvements. By investing more government money on infrastructure, factor mobility is going to increase, meaning more people are going to be able to get to their jobs and work. This is going to increase levels of output and productive capacity, so as a result of this, our LRAS is going to shift outwards to the right. Evaluating improvements to infrastructure. Firstly, it costs money, which is a big problem because a lot of other interventionist kind of techniques do not. However, it does improve social welfare and standards of living for the rest of the population. Nationalisation. Nationalisation is the process of making privately owned firms state-owned, so it's the reverse of privatisation. This allows the government to take failing businesses and invest in them, which will therefore create more jobs and increase productive capacity. The problem with this is that it costs money, but it will actually improve social welfare. Also, it gives a disincentive, however, for workers to work because they're not going to be able to keep their retained profits, which they previously may have been able to do with a privatised business. As a result, people aren't going to want to work as much anymore, and levels of productive efficiency and capacity will decrease. This has been the end of the lesson, and we have now reached the end of our AS level economics course. Good luck in your exam, and I hope you do really well. If you need any more help, be sure to visit revisealevel.co.uk or the channel playlist, where all of our AS level economic videos will be on there. Thanks for watching, and good luck.